Good afternoon, and welcome to the JCC of Metro Detroit's 69th Annual Detroit Jewish Book Fair. I'm Sandy Matz.
And I'm Jennifer LePayton, and we are Associate Chairs of Book Fair. It is our pleasure to welcome you on this Wednesday afternoon to Lunchtime with the Authors, featuring Nobody Will Tell You This But Me, a true as told to me story by Bess Kalb, and Love is a Rebellious Bird by Elayne Klasson. The goal of the Detroit Jewish Book Fair is to bring the best new Jewish books and authors from around the world to Metro Detroit. This year, the rooms we're all sitting in may be different, but that purpose remains. The book fair runs until December 9th, and we have an exceptional lineup of events planned. To see our full event schedule, learn about ways to support Book Fair, watch events you may have missed, and find our online store where you can find Nobody Will Tell You This But Me and Love is a Rebellious Bird, and plenty of other hand-selected books and gifts, please visit our website at culturalarts.jcc.org/bookfair.
This year, in order to provide as much programming to the community as possible, we've made all our events free of charge. So, if you enjoy this event and other book fair events, please consider becoming a patron or donating to Book Fair. You can either do it both or just pick which one you would like and go to our website again, culturalarts.jcc.org/bookfair. We rely on community support to make this annual event possible. So thank you in advance for becoming part of the family. The Book Fair team would like to thank the following sponsors for their support of this event. Co-sponsor, Arlene Rubenstein, and supporters, National Council of Jewish Women Michigan, West Bloomfield Township Public Library, and Temple Israel. We have a really special event for you today, and we want you to be a part of it. You can ask questions and offer comments in the YouTube comments section below, or by texting the number in the corner of your screen. Our speakers have a great talk prepared, and they will take as many questions as they can. While you're here at our YouTube channel, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and click the reminder bell. That way, you'll never miss any of our exciting events.
Lunchtime with the Authors joins two authors in conversation, and this year we're excited to present Bess Kalb, author of Nobody Will Tell You This But Me, a true as told to me story, and Elaine Klassen, author of Love is a Rebellious Bird. TV writer Bess Kalb saved every voicemail her grandmother Bobby Bell ever left her. Bobby was a force and doted on Bess. Bess adored Bobby. Then at 90, Bobby died. But in this debut memoir, Nobody Will Tell You This But Me, Bobby is speaking to Bess once more, in a voice as passionate as it ever was in life. With humor and poignancy, Bess Kalb gives us proof of the special bond that can skip a generation and endure beyond death. Bess Kalb is an Emmy-nominated writer for Jimmy Kimmel Live. Her writing for the show earned her a Writers Guild Award in 2016. She has also written for the Oscars, the Emmys, and is a regular contributor to The New Yorker's Daily Shouts column. She is the head writer and executive producer of Yearly Departed, a forthcoming comedy special. Bess currently lives in Los Angeles. Please join me in welcoming Bess Kalb.
Hello, Sandy and Jennifer. Thank you so much. Hello to the Detroit community. It's so exciting to be here with you from my house in Los Angeles this afternoon for you. I say this morning, although it does feel like an afternoon for me too. I've been up since 4 with my 15-month-old who is currently refusing to nap. So if a sudden screaming or mama happens right off camera, you will see me do exactly why I will be paying for his therapy until he's 40. I will continue to work and do this book fair presentation with you. I will not be moved. And then one day he'll write a book about me. It'll be great. And he'll come and do a Detroit Jewish Book Fair event. I wrote this book, Nobody Will Tell You This But Me, which I will show here. Maybe some of you have read it. Hopefully some of you might be interested in it after our talk. I wrote this book as was so articulately said in the introduction, because I love my grandma. And when she died, I was tasked with delivering the eulogy at her funeral. And as a comedy writer, as a writer and former journalist, I, was putting a lot of thought into this. And I couldn't quite figure out how to properly eulogize the woman who helped raise me, my best friend, in the sense that we spoke on the phone every day. My issues with my friends were her issues with her friends were mine. This was somebody who was very much part of my daily life, my upbringing, my soul, my sense of purpose, my sense of self. How do you, in a short speech, commemorate somebody who meant everything to you? And so I woke my husband up at 2 a.m, the night before her funeral, the morning before her funeral. And I said, what if I just did one of her voicemails? What if I did the eulogy as her? Would that be in poor taste? And he said, potentially. I said, just trust me. I've got this. I'm going to memorialize her as she would want it, in her own words. And so I got up there in Massachusetts at the morning of her funeral, in front of my grieving relatives, in front of her widower, my grandpa Hank, who to this day is the most shaken by her loss and most crushed by her loss. And I looked out into the audience and I delivered a voicemail that's in this book. And it was about her taking me to preschool when I was a little girl, about how she would sit there outside the classroom door, and every 5 minutes I would give a knock on the door and she would pop her head up into the window and smile at me. And then I would go back and play with the other kids, and how I did that for a week. And she did that for the week, and the sacrifice, and how she wasn't a young woman, but she still, sat there outside the classroom door, and she was kvetching at me, and she was telling me essentially how much she loved me, but also making me feel extremely guilty about it. And these were her words. This was her story and her voice about our relationship. And I looked out into the audience, and my grandpa was laughing, and my mom was laughing, and people were feeling like she was in the room. And I just kind of started riffing, and I would embellish a little bit here and there, and I would let myself have it in her voice. And I realized I'm channeling her not just as a granddaughter, but I'm channeling her as a writer. And my grieving process became writing as her. And I wrote about 40 pages. I wrote her take on how she would have thought about the funeral. She would go, God, there was a lot of Hebrew. Everyone all of a sudden becomes very religious on behalf of the dead. I was writing as her. I was writing in her voice, and it was my private grieving mechanism. It was a therapeutic thing that I did. And around that time, my literary agent, Erin Malone, a nice Catholic girl from Ohio who's never met a Jewish grandmother in her life, said, Bess, what have you been writing? And I said, look, I've just been processing the death of my grandmother. I'm not sure if there's a book in this. This is something that means a lot to me. It means a lot to my family. I've never let anyone read it. I don't think anyone could relate. And she said, just send it. And half an hour later, I got an email back saying, this is a book. And those 40 pages are the first 40 pages of Nobody Will Tell You This But Me, from the funeral to her talking about our life together, to her talking about her mother growing up in the tenements in Brooklyn, to starting the story of her grandmother who fled from the pogroms in Russia, in Belarus under the Pale of Settlement in the 1880s. So once it got, basically that was the Erin Malone test. That was, if somebody who has nothing to do with my family, not the audience in the funeral home, in the synagogue, not the audience that knew her, but somebody who not only didn't know her, but doesn't have any way to relate to this type of person. If it moves this person, then maybe there's an audience for this. Maybe my grandma would be loved and would inspire and would resonate with so many more people than I could have imagined. And that's exactly what's happened. In writing this book, what began as a private grieving exercise ended up as a way to get my grandmother into the hearts and into the minds of so many people. And it brings back memories of other people's grandmothers. I get messages all day on Instagram, on Twitter, after events like this. I get emails saying, this book made me think about my grandmother, this grandmother. This book made me think about my granddaughter. The connections between people's own families that my family story has brought out is exactly why I did it. And it was also something that I did to just prove to myself that the story of an ordinary woman, my grandmother wasn't a historical figure. She didn't discover a cure for a disease. She was just an ordinary woman. She never even really had a job. She was a mother and a grandmother, which, my God, was a job in her time, a job that was incredibly daunting for her. So to see that a woman who led what would otherwise be called an ordinary life was extraordinary and worthy of this sort of novelistic treatment, even though it's nonfiction. This is a hero's journey about my grandmother and her arc of being a impoverished young woman to a difficult mother to a doting and loving grandmother. And that to me is the stuff of an epic book. When I wrote it, I didn't realize just how Jewish the story was. I didn't realize just how Jewish I was. And I think part of it was that, my grandmother wasn't a very religious person. We went to temple on the high holy days and, it was bat mitzvah, and she saw to it that I had the proper spread after the bat mitzvah. We were traditionally Jewish, but we weren't very religious. And now I will show you, because we're doing this event from my home office, I can show you the books that went into writing this book. I became a sort of scholar of shtetl Jewish history in order to really figure out my grandmother, in order to figure out where she came from. And in so doing, where I came from, I had to really investigate the shtetl. And so in this book, there's a 20-page epic about my grandmother's grandmother. About my grandmother's mother, Rose, who fled Tsarist Russia alone at age 12. She came to America alone as a 12-year-old, and I was not allowed to ride the subway until I was 15 alone. So this was just something that I couldn't really fathom. And in order to paint a picture of it, I called my former college, and I got connected to a Russian studies department, and then talked to a few professors and figured out what I needed to do to actually construct the shtetl, which is a place that has been erased from history, as with Jews as we're extinguished once a century, our history gets erased too. And so there was really no clear understanding, except from like Fiddler on the Roof and the works of Isaac Bashevis Singer. There were ideas of the pogrom and shtetl, but I had to figure out what it would have been like for my ancestor to leave the shtetl and get to America, which enter these books, The Jews of Eastern Europe, 1772 to 1881. This was fascinating. You learn about how laws around kosher meat starved Jews out, laws around not being able to study Talmud at certain days made sure that they couldn't read. It's terrible. Becoming Soviet Jews, the Bolshevik experiment in Minsk was just sort of an idea about how culture existed in the shtetl, ideas of little newspapers that were operating in secret, and ways that people got ideas of the Golden Medina, the promised land in America, to get tickets. How do you actually get to America? There was this sort of cultural movement that happened. This is a book of maps, the Atlas of Jewish History, and each map is just a Lord of the Rings style impossible journey that people made on foot, by train, by horse cart, to get from this impoverished, persecuted nightmare to a coast, to a port that would somehow transport them. Golden Age of Shtetl, a great book about, sort of give the color. And then Pogrom by Stephen Zipperstein, which is a harrowing book about just how deadly and impossible survival was at that time. And so in doing this grieving exercise, I ended up constructing my Jewish history. And what's been so gratifying as an author and a granddaughter and a Jew is to hear that so many people have seen their Jewish history and their family struggle and their family's impossible journeys reflected back at them. And that is what went into Nobody Will Tell You This But Me. And ultimately, what sounds like a very heavy experience is a comedy book. I'm a comedy writer, but as any comedian will tell you, the heart of a joke is the truth. And so in order to excavate the truth, I had to go kind of dark, and I had to go deep into the history, and what comes out has made people laugh and made people cry, but most of all have made people fall in love with Bobby Bell, my hero, my grandmother, and a woman that I miss every single day. So thank you all for coming to hear a little bit about the process of writing the book and a little bit about my grandmother. And I look forward to hearing your questions in the Q&A. I'll pass it back to Sandy, and we'll go from there.
Thank you so much, Bess. We really loved your talk, and we can't wait for the Q&A portion. Who is it we love, and why do we love them? Those questions are asked by Judith, the main character of Love is a Rebellious Bird, toward the end of her life in trying to understand why she chose Elliot Pine to love. Why, for 60 years, did she persist in loving someone who never gave as much as he was given? Her feelings for this man cost her and impinged on every other relationship in her life. After 60 years, however, it all changes. Elaine Klassen has had a long career in academia and journalism, both in California and the Caribbean. In her 70s, she has now published her first novel to excellent critical reviews, winning and being shortlisted for several prizes for contemporary and debut fiction, including being a finalist for the Goldberg Prize for Debut Fiction from the National Jewish Book Awards. Please join me in welcoming Elayne Klasson.
Thank you so much, Sandy. This is really a wonderful homecoming for me because I went to University of Michigan for grad school, go blue. So I have my Michigan roots, even though I live near Santa Barbara, California now. And I think the weather here is a little better than there, but I had wonderful years in Ann Arbor, and I'm delighted to have been invited back. And I really loved the pairing, which at first puzzled me because Bess and myself are at very different ends of the age spectrum, but reading her book and thinking about what I wanted to talk about with you today, I think it was actually a very good pairing of two Jewish women writers at different ends of the age spectrum. I'm going to talk about writing when old. It's a lot to say about being old, but I wanted to mention to you the late, great writer, Nora Ephron, who in one of her delightful essay collections said, it was called, I Feel Bad About My Neck. And she said, you can cheek time, use makeup, diet, but that neck with its crepey wrinkles, that turkey gizzard shape, it's an age giveaway. She also wrote how she'd walk down Madison Avenue in New York and she'd see that her hair had split in the back and scalp was showing. And she gave it for no reason in particular, the name of an aruba, when your hair splits in back. And I guess Nora Ephron had beautiful, long, beautiful, thick hair. And so now every time I walk out of the house, even though I've just brushed my hair, I check for arubas in the back and darn it, they always come back. Another indignity of aging. So I could go on about the physical infirmities and indignities of aging. But of course, poor Nora Ephron never got a chance to really get old. She died at age 72 of a rare blood disease. So I guess I'll put up with the indignities of aging. There are also cognitive changes that we all experience. The absolute frustration of not being able to think of a word. And in my book, I'll plug it now, Love is a Rebellious Bird, there is a scene where three friends are gathering for lunch with a fourth friend. And they're trying to tell their friend about a beautiful red jacket that the three of them all saw on somebody when she walked by. And they say to the fourth friend, you know, that jacket we used to wear to work, the jacket with buttons, what's it called? And no one can think of the word. And neither can the fourth friend think of the word who's hearing the story. And that jacket with buttons. And so up comes, and actually she's been standing there, a sexy young waitress wearing tight jeans. And she's tapping her order pad impatiently. And she says, ladies, blazer, is that the word you're thinking of? And all four women say, blazer, that's the word, blazer. But meanwhile, they're thinking, you bitch. Someday you're going to get old and you're not going to be able to think of a word either. So at age 70, I found myself with 3 unpublished manuscripts in my desk drawer and on my hard drive. I've had a good career in academia, teaching at one of the state colleges in California, and also for a time overseas on the island of Barbados. I also raised 4 kids. And much of the time, after an early divorce and rather early widowhood in my late 40s, I raised 4 kids mostly on my own. I've written many newspaper columns, essays, editorials, and I've edited other people's work. But my passion, unswerving and constant, has been fiction. In my late 40s, I said to my now late husband, I said to him, if I don't give this a shot, I'll always regret it. I need to find out if I'm capable of writing fiction. And so with my greatest passion, and to give myself a little bit more confidence, I enrolled in creative writing classes at Stanford University. The creative writing program there is excellent, and we lived very close to it. I had wonderful classes with wonderful teachers, and I even created several writing groups with other creative writing students, and we would exchange chapters back and forth. And I submitted many, many stories to begin with in short stories for publication. And I did okay. You know, I got a few, I won a few contests. I got a few honorable mentions. I even received several prestigious writing residencies and beautiful gifts in beautiful parts of the United States. And I say this not just for shameless self-promotion, but to say that I wasn't writing for my own therapy or my own amusement. I was dead serious. I didn't look at writing as a hobby. It's a vocation. So then I completed first 1 novel, and then 2 novels, and then 3. And I used every connection I had, and I submitted widely to agents and to even publishers that accept unagented work. And I got some wonderful rejections. In fact, I got so many rejections, as some famous writer has said, I could have papered my writing room with all the rejections I got. Some of the rejections were absolutely lovely and very encouraging. A rather prestigious agent said to me, and she took home my book over the Christmas holidays, and she said, I loved your book. I loved your book. I couldn't put it down, but I don't think it's for me. And inexplicably, I mean, I never knew exactly why these people turned the book down. And she did not represent me. But I refused to get bitter, and I refused to get discouraged. My mantra was that when I got good enough, they wouldn't be able to turn me away. I would get published. I just had to keep writing, and I did. I spent every spare moment at my desk. And therefore, after about 20 years, I had 3 completed novels. And I would send out each one about 15 or 20 times. Now, I know some authors send out their novels many more times. I think the people say J.K. Rowling sent out 70 times for her Harry Potter series, but I would get discouraged after submitting about 15 or 20 times. And what would I do? I would say, okay, I'll go back to what really gives me love and pleasure. And that is writing. And so that's why I have 3 completed novels. I have an early novel about that I wrote about the island of Barbados, where I lived, and the history of Barbados. I have another novel about an adopted boy and views of this boy from his adoptive parents and his birth parents. That would be kind of a nature nurture novel. And finally, I wrote this novel, Love is a Rebellious Bird, which is an account of the power shifts in a 60-year love relationship between a man and a woman who are not married to each other, who have married other people, divorced, had other things happen in their life, but keep appearing in each other's lives over the decades. Reaching age 70, I reached some hard questions. Do I want to die or go have dementia with 3 novels in my desk? And I was old. I could no longer kid myself. I'm not saying older. I'm saying I was old. What am I going to do about this? I'm not trying for cheap sentimentality, but my greatest desire was to have readers read my work. So who beside my family and my friends was reading? I then had a bit of information from my cousin about a publishing house. I won't go into too many of the details. A publishing house up in Berkeley that publishes just women. It's called She Writes. And It's led by a woman named Brooke Warner, who provides a platform for women authors while providing, in some cases, even better services of a big New York publishing house, such as editing, cover art, and distribution. And most importantly, this publisher that I had, while still curated and selective, publishes women who have had to fight and knock down the doors of traditional publishing houses that have little time or space for unproven women authors, particularly authors who are no longer young. My novel, Love is a Rebellious Bird, and I'll tell you about the title if anyone wants to know later, was released about a year ago. It did indeed have gorgeous cover art, which I was very delighted about. And it has received rigorous and impressive editing. And most importantly, my work has been read, reviewed, and discussed. And this being here today it was my dream, is to have my book being discussed. The other factor in being an old writer is the fear of losing one's edge. I wonder if I'm as sharp or precise in word choices. Can I balance what goes into creative writing, the many strands of plot that go into writing a novel, and interweaving multiple characters' lives when I was, which are the factors in really creating a good novel? And the answer came to me of did I have it at this age, was when I reread one of my favorite writers, and that is Wallace Stegner. And one of my favorite books is about a long-term friendship between two couples. It's called Crossing to Safety. I don't know if anyone's read it, but I adore this book. And I did the math. Wallace Stegner wrote this book in 1987, and I did the math, and he was 78 when he wrote Crossing to Safety. And I maintain that's a perfect time to write a novel about long-term relationship between two couples, one of whom is dying. Through the prism of age, Stegner was able to examine longitudinally what makes us and our relationships as rich as they are. And that was a key for me, is how to use my age to look back on important relationships. He also, and I think I can, and I think Bess did in her wonderful memoir about her grandmother as well. But I think it's even easier as an old person to be able to look at mortality straight in the eye. So it gives us a chance to truthfully examine your life and taking responsibility for your choices. And that to me is the stuff of good fiction. I think about other authors who actually had their debut late in life. And the first one that came to mind was Harriet Dorr, who wrote a book called Stones for Ibarra. And this was her debut fiction at age 74, and she won the National Book Award for it. She died in 2002 after she had won this prestigious award. She harvested memories from her long life. And she said, and I'm going to quote Harriet Dorr here, writing derives from an accumulation of experiences. It's as if you collect facts and observations over time, like a stone to stand on, and from there, your imagination takes over. There are many other authors who bloomed late in life, and I think of Tilly Olsen, and she writes a lot about how hard it was to write with little children and a job, and ended up publishing in her 70s. I also think, however, about the Chilean author, Isabel Allende. She's considered the most widely read Spanish language author. And now at the age of 78, she's published another novel called A Long Pedal to the Sea, just released to excellent reviews. And forgive me if I throw in one of my Isabel Allende quotes, because there's so many, and I love Isabel Allende. But one of her wonderful quotes is, I think reflects her long life and wisdom. She says, "For women, the best aphrodisiacs are words. The G-spot is in the ears. He who looks for it below wastes his time." Her books remain full of her long lifetime of wisdom, and her latest is another gift of epic storyteller. There are many others who write when they're old. I think men like Philip Roth, who did, I think, some of his best work late in life. And then I think also about Alice Munro, who is a Nobel laureate, who writes and remained pithy and delightful well into her 80s. She writes, however, when she looks back on her life, about what it was like to be a young writer and writing in her writing room and hearing her toddler bang on the door, "Mommy, Mommy," and how she just kept working when it was her working time. So the difficulties of writing as a young writer. So at the age of 72, I watched the publishing and the birth of my new novel, and of this novel, Love is a Rebellious Bird. 72 is very old to be giving birth. The novel, however, has been very well reviewed. It's won some major awards and recognition, but I doubt that I could have written Love is a Rebellious Bird as a young woman. It sets down much of what I know about love and relationships, long and short term, that have occurred in my life. At my age, I am very aware of time. I think about the words and the stories I still want to set down, and I know I don't have forever to get to them. In these years, which are no longer as busy and frenetic as they were with children and a job, this is indeed a great pleasure, but it's also a responsibility. Wrinkled hair, wrinkles on my face, thinning hair, crow's feet. I know now as a writer in her 70s that I have no time to waste. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you, Elaine. That was a terrific presentation. And now we're going to bring everybody back and we will start our Q&A. There were quite a few comments. I just wanted to mention, first of all, to Bess, that a lot of people really loved your book and they put it in the comments. And we have one comment that said, "I had a grandmother so much like Bobby. I enjoyed this book so much because of that. The honesty and lack of tact that she had was so much my life with Grandma Sally. I was her life also." And then someone else said, "Having never had a grandmother relationship, I loved this grandmother and wanted her to be mine." A couple others, "I definitely want to read this." So that's great. People are going to want to go out and read it. Someone else said, "I had a grandmother relationship, can't wait to read." Rabbi Kalesny wrote, "I read the book in one sitting, gave it to my mother immediately, who told every friend she knows about the book so they could read it. I laughed, shook my head, yes, and cried. So, so good."
Well, I really appreciate that. It was a book I was afraid to put out in the world for that. It really would. I do feel like I have one book in me. It is this book. It was from it was from a place that felt like it was not coming from me. It was coming from bringing my grandmother back to life when I needed her. And I wrote from instinct and from voice. Not this was purely an exercise of, it sounds, there's no way to talk about it without it sounding unspeakably cheesy, but it was just from my heart. This was, and so my goal was to just put her on the page and bring her back. And so that it is reminding people that she seems real to people, and it's reminding people of their grandmothers is exactly the goal. And it's also extremely, I feel less like a crazy person who was, I wrote this book weeping and laughing. And, there were times that my husband would come in. This was before I had children. So it was before it was acceptable for me to just burst out crying in the middle of the day. But there were times when my husband would come into my office where I was writing, going, "Are you okay? Did you just get are you fired? Did something, because I was like, "No, I'm thinking about tea with my grandma." And he was like, "Oh God," he married a Jewish woman. But that, that is why I wrote it. So those comments mean a lot to me. And I thank you very much for sharing them.
Elaine, you alluded to the fact that you kind of wanted us to ask you how you got the title for the book. So can you tell us?
Oh, if anybody listens to the audiobook, you're going to be the initial sound that you'll hear is the aria from Carmen, which is "Love is a Rebellious Bird." And it's the famous aria when Carmen talks about how you can't capture love. it comes to you. You may not want it. This isn't the one you want. But then you see someone you want, and that rebellious bird flies away. So it's about control, and love being one of the things in your life you just can't control. And I love opera. The original people that heard the book and heard the title said, oh, people don't like opera. Don't use that. And I came out with 2 or 3 other titles and worked with my publisher with that, and eventually went back to the original because a lot of times people don't know what it means, but I think that I do the translation of the aria in the beginning of the book. And I think it just so much says what I'm trying to say in 340 pages, that we don't control.
Having read the book, that title makes even more sense to me now. Thank you.
Bess, how long did you record your grandmother's voicemails?
I first started recording them in 2012, about a year before I got married, when she got really sick for the first time. You know, I don't know what, I can't really describe that instinct except to know that I wanted to capture her, that I already was afraid of letting go. And so, you know, it was a rare hoarding instinct from somebody who's constantly cleaning. I really couldn't delete them, and I couldn't, I would hear her, I heard her voicemail. She sounded a little bit sick in it. She didn't have the sort of pep in her voice that she normally had. And there, you know, the thing comes up on your phone. I have an iPhone and had one at the time. And it was like, would you like to delete this message? And it was like, I couldn't have clicked no faster, you know, as if it was on fire. And so every time she would call, they would just stay. And I can show you, we're on a you know, web presentation. So, you know, this wouldn't happen at a normal book talk. But one from my husband being like, where are you? And then all of them are my grandma. Oh, I'm not sure. But these are in the book. The book has a lot of pictures, but they're in it. And this earliest one is, that you can see, is from June of 2012. And so, yeah, that was the impulse behind them.
Thank you.
They're still there.
Elayne, do you feel that ageism is definitely a thing for women in publishing? There seem to be some very powerful older female agents, and this person wonders if they are supportive.
I think the agent can be supportive, but he or she knows whether she can sell the book. And even though the agent, and I found that a lot of agents liked my work, but they weren't sure they could sell it. So I think there's ageism in publishing and publicity, but not necessarily coming from the agent. Yeah, I definitely do. And especially when you don't have a proven track record. I think that'll be easier the next time around, but it was hard for me to crack that glass ceiling of publishing to begin with.
Bess, did your grandmother have other grandchildren? And if so, what was her relationship with them?
Yes, of course. Yes, my grandmother had 7 grandchildren who she loved equally and fiercely. And had different independent relationships with each of them. This is just the story of our relationship. It's not a political answer. It's an accurate one. You know, this is just, this book is a matriarchy. This book is the story of as a matrilineal love story about a great grandmother, only daughter, and only daughter. And each one of us are the only daughter of an only daughter of an only daughter of an only daughter, which is a strange thing. In a chapter in the book called The Fruit of the Vine, she sort of unpacks the symbolism of that. We're just sort of the fruit off of one vine. There's the symbolism. But I don't have a master's degree. But truly it is just specifically trying to isolate the matrilineal of our family's narrative. And so it would have been inappropriate and certainly not my place, but also just not part of the story to go into the rest of the relationships in her life. It is just a personal one. And those are the books from my cousins, my beloved cousins, who are so supportive and such important parts of my life for them to tell.
Elayne, what's happening with the 2 completed novels that you have in your desk?
I was wondering that too. That was my
I just want to get back to Bess for a second because I absolutely loved your cover, the Russian dolls nested in each other. And I mean, I just feel that's the way it is. We're all from our mothers and our grandmothers, we're nesting and getting parts of them. So it's a great cover.
Yeah, that was another Erin Malone stroke of genius. That this truly was an image that she sent me after reading the book. My first reader and one of my closest confidants as a writer is Erin, and she nailed it. It's so lucky as a writer to have somebody who
Right.
is a sort of a safe place and someone who really gets you.
Right.
It really was. Beshert is a word that my grandmother used to say a lot, which oddly isn't in the book, is something that I noticed when reading the audiobook. She was constantly going, if it's Beshert, it's Beshert. And so, maybe in the paperback, I'll like have a addendum, but it really does feel that picture, it couldn't, I mean, there is no picture that exemplifies our relationship better. We're just nesting dolls in each other. And the Russian symbolism doesn't hurt either.
So Jennifer, your question about what's next is that the book that I wrote before this is called Earthquake Child, and it's about an adopted child given the voice of his adoptive mother and his birth mother, trying to explain the very difficult path that this young boy has taken. And, I think it boils simply down to nature versus nurture, the question. My leading question in this book, Love is a Rebellious Bird, has to do with why we love the people we do and why we sometimes choose a difficult path with the people we love. But I think in the book that I wrote before this, Earthquake Child, it's about the nature nurture question of what makes our kids what they are. And try to tell a quick story. Our publisher had a retreat for the 40 women that she was publishing that year. It was a really wonderful gift. And each of us stood up and gave our elevator speech. And it was really early in the process for me. And I didn't know how to give an elevator speech of Love is a Rebellious Bird. And I was wandering and not very clear about it. And I realized as all of the other women were standing up that a lot of their books had a message, like it was about drug addiction or it was about some social problem that mine wasn't really a social problem. So I went to the publisher and I said, would you look at my earlier book, Earthquake Child? I mean, maybe I should lead with that one because it's about adoption, which affects a lot of families. And she read it kindly, or she read a good part of it. And she said, I'll take either. I like them both. So I went with my initial gut, which is to put out Love is a Rebellious Bird. But now I'm doing a rewrite and a serious reworking of Earthquake Child, and hopefully I'll have it out in a year.
Oh, that's great. I just have to say that I'm so grateful that you just pointed out about the cover. I'm a daughter of Russian immigrants. I didn't get this. And when I look at it now, it's so obvious. So thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah, no, it's subtle. Although I will say so many people say, oh, the book with the cinnamon roll on the cover. And now I can't unsee that. I'm like, oh, God. Erin, you're fired.
I just want to read what one of the viewers commented. Elayne, age is only a number. Your words prove your vitality, and I'm sure there are more novels ready to emerge. Bess, I had no grandmother but a grandfather who taught us to love.
Yeah, I mean, I also, to Elaine's point, and there's somebody, I was reading the comments while during the last one, and somebody wrote about I'm turning 70 in a week and having a difficult time accepting this age, but you have given such a positive twist on aging. As a present to myself, I've already, and then I think she's saying, purchased your book, thank you. And having, that's something that after writing this book has opened me up to a world of empathy and has really centered that in something that I think about all the time. And I think your talk was so moving for that reason. And I'm really inspired by what you've shared with us. And I also, as a huge Nora Ephron fan and a huge I Feel Bad About My Neck fan, it's something that I've seen from a quickly approaching distance, but understanding the inevitability of age is something that, in writing in the voice of a 90-year-old woman, I was really trepidatious about. This was not my territory. This was not something that felt, in many ways, that felt appropriate for me to do until I had to do this sort of real because I knew my grandma so much and I'd heard her speak about aging so much, just tried to be truthful to how she felt and what she said. And I'm excited to read. I hope people write from their experience and write at the ages that they feel are inspired to write. And, men have certainly done that for decades. Why can't we?
I just want to interject here is that we so often get value from our life by telling our stories to other women.
Yeah.
And I think that Bess and we're really representing all the decades of a woman's life.
Yeah.
And I find it really important that we can tell these stories.
That's true. I mean, it sounds pretentious, but Joan Didion said we tell ourselves stories in order to live. And with what I think we're seeing here today and saying here today is we also write down our stories to keep them alive. And I think in writing the story of an older woman, it was me trying to say, don't look away. Especially in the later chapters and her writing about her decline in really specific and in some ways graphic terms. Mm-hmm. And saying like, don't look away. This is this vivacious woman who was this hero of my life and had this sort of glamorous past and had these high flying times as a young woman. Look where she was at the end of her life and what she really wanted. And I was happy to be able to shine a sort of a flattering spotlight on that.
Right.
Bess, we know that you're busy taking care of a 15-month-old, but besides that, if you have a few minutes spare time, what is your next project?
So I have a comedy special coming out on Amazon on December 30th that is starring and co-executive produced with me and Rachel Brosnahan, who plays the marvelous Mrs. Maisel, also on Amazon. And she's just as delightful in person as she is on your screen. So if you're a fan of her, maybe you'll be interested to see her on that. And then my next project is adapting Nobody Will Tell You This But Me into a movie. I'm writing the screenplay. It's being directed by a fabulous female director, Elizabeth Chomko, who directed a movie about Alzheimer's and aging. And I specifically wanted to work with her because of her depiction of older women. She handled it tenderly and with humanity and empathy. And so she is exactly the person that I would entrust such a personal story with. It was also important to me to work with a female director. There's a lot of talk about that in the industry that I'm in, and it takes people actually putting their money and their stories where their mouth is and hiring a female director. So she's at the helm. And the production company behind it made a movie that I love, also based on a true story, called Bad Education, starring Hugh Jackman and Allison Janney, about the scandal in the Roslyn school system. And that was a story that was done so with heart and pathos and comedy, and done very well. So it was done well. And I hope it's done well. But I'm excited to be writing it. And I have another book on this desk here called The Nutshell Technique. That's basically screenwriting for dummies. And so I'm working on that while occasionally raising my son.
It's good to have priorities.
My son, I would say 92% of the time, and then sort of like shoveling some food the rest, and then this in my stress dreams.
Bess, who's going to play you and who's going to play your grandmother?
Well, I have an answer to this, and the answer for me, obviously, is Catherine Zeta-Jones. I have no idea who would play me, but for my grandma, she would say Meryl or nothing. Speaking of Efron, the real answer to that is there are so many fabulous actors who could take on a role like this and be the protagonist of a movie and not be a caricature, not be sort of the mother or the grandmother. And it's exciting to be writing a movie for an older woman. And there are actors from stage and screen and TV who I would be honored to entrust with this part and have them make it their own. So I'm excited. I'm also as a writer and as somebody who's never made a movie before, I'm just writing it as my grandma. I'm writing it as if she's going to play herself, because I think that'll be the best screenplay. So I don't have any actors in mind for it. I'm literally writing it as if it's her delivering the lines and her doing it. So it's hard for me to sort of to say anybody else because I can't write it that way. Sorry if that's that's an annoying answer, but
No, not at all. Not at all. I know there's still a chance for me.
there you go. Yeah, this is a very coy way of saying I'll have my people call your people.
One more question for Elayne from Brenda. She loved the book and she wants to know if there's anything biographical in it. Autobiographical, I assume.
Right. I think that in my talk, I referenced the fact that every bit of my life is in every bit of my writing. So, but then the trick is to make it a story and make it a story that's cohesive and makes sense. So I did grow up in the Jewish North Side of Chicago, and I did have many similar experiences, but there was no Elliot in my life, not specifically. But I felt like to talk about the universality, and we talked about how people related to Bess's book and think about their grandmother. A lot of people have come to me and said that there was an Elliot in their life, a golden boy, the boy that was everything, the boy that was brilliant and smart. And, and then at my 50th high school reunion, I saw the Elliot come to the 50th reunion. And, sometimes that's kind of a bummer because they come and they have a big fat pot belly and it's like, ooh, what became of Elliot? But this gentleman on whom I kind of based Elliot was still gorgeous in his 70s. I mean, a really handsome, dapper guy and very brilliant and very successful and very accomplished. So I kind of based it on the golden boy in my high school life. And but I've been so surprised and delighted how many people have related to having a man like that in their life, and then what happens with that.
Thank you.
We have a few comments that I'm going to read because they're really interesting. Lawrence Finkelstein, who I believe is a friend of Jennifer's, writes, Bess, coincidentally, a friend just forwarded your New Yorker column, 30 Most Disappointing Under 30. I'm now your fan for life.
I lost a few friends over that column. Fictionalized versions of it's the Forbes 30 Under 30 list comes out every year, and this is actually a comedy piece that I wrote in 2017, and so I always know when the Forbes list comes out because people start retweeting my parody of it. I was never on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list, and
that's
why I wrote that.
Rabbi Kalazny says, both of your presentations serve to deepen my love of books and stories. Thank you for sharing your talent with us. And Rhonda says, I'm so grateful for women who can write in ways that can speak to so many of us. And let's have one last question for Elayne. Has your life in academia affected your approach to fiction writing?
I think it's just that I've always been such a reader, reading since childhood, but I never had the guts to say I wanted to be a writer. I mean, Bess, you're lucky that way that you had the courage, but in my era, it's like you go to college and you become a nurse or a teacher. And I just don't think I could have gone home and said, Mom, Dad, I want to be a writer, even though I got a lot of encouragement. So my experience in academia was my day job. I liked teaching. I love young people. And I think it keeps you more current to be in academia and hear what college people are thinking and doing. But the truth is it's my love of reading. And then I have a PhD in psychology. So I think I've always been really fascinated with the relationships we form, the healthy ones, the unhealthy ones, and why we form the ones we do.
Bess, do you have one last comment before we wrap up?
Oh, no, I'm just very grateful for everyone who's joined us today. And thank you to Sandy and Jennifer and Elayne for putting this on and being part of it. And I'm from one tired mom to the Detroit community. Thank you for putting up with me. And I'm so thrilled that even in this strange and isolated time, we can all come together and talk about books and talk about writing and be so supportive of each other as women and as authors.
It's a wonderful format. Thank you, Bess, and thank you, Elaine, for being with us for such an engaging discussion. And thank you to all of you at home for joining us. And our next event is Getting Good at Getting Older by Rabbi Laura Geller, and that's at 4 o'clock. Remember, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and visit our website, again, culturalarts.jccdet.org/book fair, and visit the website for our full schedule and ways to get involved. Have a great day.
Thank you.